Welcome to the station of decapitation with Thatcher Head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by Joe O'Connell, director of Rondo and Bob, which is coming out June 7th. It's very cool to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
And for people not aware, what is Rondo and Bob?
Rondo and Bob is the story of Robert Burns, the art director on the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as well as a bunch of other films, who really created the look of classic, what you think of as 70s, 80s horror. He did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hills Have Eyes, The Howling, Reanimator, Microwave Massacre.
Another classic
stuff. But he was obsessed with the cult actor Rondo Hatton, whose appearance was disfigured by acromegaly. And we kind of tell, when I met Bob Burns, when I first met him, he's not alive anymore. Spoiler alert. I met him, he gave me a script he had written about Rondo Hatton. He was obsessed with this guy, and he had a script called Rondo and May, which was a love story about Rondo Hatton and his wife. And so our film, we're not adapting that screenplay by any means, but the idea of Bob Burns searching for Rondo Hatton, who was well dead, but he went and talked to his widow. And so we kind of tell the stories of their two lives and their intersection, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen the movie. I really enjoyed it. So I was just going to ask for people who haven't seen it, but so you said you met Bob Burns before. So when was the first time you met him?
My first film is a film called Danger God. It's about B-movie stuntman Gary Kent,
who was on the show when your documentary came out.
Yeah, okay. And Gary hooked me up with Bob. I was a statesman, and Bob Burns was doing an event at the local blood bank. He was a serial blood donor, and he had gotten to the 5-gallon mark.
Oh, wow. So
they had a big event for him, and his posters were, the movies he'd worked, the posters were up on the walls, and he was signing autographs, all that kind of stuff. And I talked to him, and that's when he gave me that script for Rondo and May. And then, then I got to know him more over time. This is the last few years of his life. As we show in the movie, he committed suicide.
Yeah.
So that was it. And I did Danger God, and we were done with it, and we were thinking, are we going to do something else? And my editor showed me footage that he had shot of Bob Burns. And I'm like, it's crazy. And then he was looking at footage of the blood bank. My editor, who I did not know at the time, was there that day. And he said, Gary Kent just walked in the room. And I said, am I right behind him? He said, you are. And so it just seemed kind of destined that, my editor had all this footage. And I was really interested in this idea of Bob Burns being obsessed with Rondo Hatton.
Because, I was going to say this. So when you originally are going to do the documentary, that was the idea all along, was to tie Rondo and Bob together. It wasn't didn't start as a Bob Burns documentary, and become something else.
No, and somebody else actually had been working on a Bob Burns documentary, unbeknownst to me. But when we started checking around, then people said, oh yeah, this guy was doing a documentary, but he quit. It was always that, because I'm more interested in the human story. Bob Burns certainly deserves a documentary just about his career. And I do this to myself. I set myself up for this situation where some people look at this film and say, I want more Rondo Hatton. Some people say, I want more Bob Burns. I want more Chainsaw. And that's not really my intention. I have to go with what I saw the movie as. Same thing with the way that it is half traditional documentary, half recreation. I went to South by Southwest a few years back, and there was a movie called Becoming Bond about George Lazenby, the forgotten James Bond. And Lazenby was there, which is cool. I mean, he was very dismissive with me. It's like, you're not important. But I talked to him a little bit, and they did this thing that they have gotten flack for. The movie is is Lazenby in a chair with the nice backdrop, good lighting, the whole thing, the traditional documentary type thing. And the other half is recreation using an actor who doesn't particularly look that much like him. So I saw that and I said, well, that's what we're going to have to do, because Bob Burns is dead. Rondo Hatton is obviously dead. So I brought in actors, and when I went searching for someone to play Bob Burns, I had the head of a local theater department. I went to him and I said, you got anybody? And he said, I got this one guy who looks more like him, but this other guy is a better actor. And I think we'll get the essence of him. I said, give me the better actor. Yeah. And, a lot of that is the impact of having seen Becoming Bond.
Mm-hmm. I always think in even, a movie, it's more important to, like you said, capture the person as opposed to because after you watch it a few minutes, you kind of forget about, exactly what they look like.
Yeah.
And sometimes that in a way, sometimes that can be distracting if the person looks, you could tell that they're trying to make them look too much like the person. Yeah.
And we had access. There are times where we did recreations when you might think we wouldn't. Mm-hmm. We had access to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre documentary, to outtakes. Said, yeah, you can, let me show you some stuff. And so he showed me stuff. And I realized it would be too jarring to have the real Bob Burns do that stuff.
Interesting.
So we just took the words and they're often in the movie, the actors are saying words that are the real words. Mm-hmm. Like I got flack in one review, the guy saying, oh, it sounds like bad 40s gangsters dialogue. It's like, that's because it was written in the 1940s by this newspaper reporter, right, who's the guy in the scene. So we tried to be as true as possible to the original.
Yeah. Well, you said the Lazenby documentary, Becoming Bond, I think you said it was, got some flack. So talk about that for Rondo and Bob. What has the feedback been like?
It's good. I mean, there are some people who want just a Bob Burns documentary, like I said, and who are into more traditional documentaries. But overall, it's been real positive. And there have been people who just totally get what we're trying to do, which is great. I mean, that's what you're after.
When Bob gave you the script, did he have any plans for it? He just wanted to read it, or did he think maybe you could make it?
He wanted to make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of his goals. He was always doing stuff. He had plans at that time to make a horror film in Seguin, Texas, where he ended up living his last few years. He had a kind of a swamp monster story called 80 John, based on a real story that he wanted to do. I have that script around too. He gave me that as well.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. He did so much. He was just this, whirling dervish of activity. He was pure creativity. And that's kind of what interested me about him too.
Yeah, it also comes through. He's very much a character. So was it easy to get people, on board to talk about him, people that knew him?
Oh, sure. Yeah. For the most part, but I don't know if I should even say that stuff.
Right, the people that
sometimes it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah. Did people generally though like him?
Some. Mm-hmm. He was very fussy, and he wanted things his way. He had a million friends, and that was the weird deal. Is Bob felt he was unlovable or incapable of love himself. And then he kills himself, and there are a million people who show up to his memorial service. Mm-hmm. Because he knew everybody. I mean, including people who ran film festivals. I mean, the guy who runs Cinema Wasteland said he would talk to him once a week. So Bob was always checking in with everybody. So, but there are people who found him overwhelming.
Right. I could get that from just the bits I've seen him. When I posted I was going to have you on the show, my friend John Dugan, who's in the documentary, he's really looking forward to seeing it. And by the way, cheap plug for me, he's actually wearing Without Your Head shirt in the documentary, which made me very excited.
But, very cool. Yeah. Okay, yeah. John introduced us at the Midwest Monster Fest in Quad Cities. where we were named best film, best feature, not just best documentary, but best feature.
Oh, very cool. So, and you've wearing some festival shirts here. So, did it play at Texas Frightmare?
Yes, it did. Yeah, played at Frightmare. It lists this Houston Horror Film Festival. We played at Sitges in Spain, which is the granddaddy of all horror film festivals. Where else? We won the best documentary at Atlanta Horror Film Festival. In the Horrible Imaginings Film Festival in Santa Ana, which is kind of a big deal. Miguel's a great guy. He created a new film festival just for us.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he's a major Rondo fan. He's the other side.
Yeah.
He created something called Horrible, which is the Horrible Realities Film Festival, and we were the first one. I mean, there were 2 films that played for their first edition of that, because he was saying, I don't know how to fit documentaries in.
Right.
And so we'll do our own separate thing, which is kind of it's a tough thing, because if you're going to a horror film festival, you want to see some horror, you want to see some blood and guts. We got some.
Yeah. So did you get to go to, I assume you went to the ones in Texas. Did you get to, how many of the festivals did you actually get to attend?
I have been to, the ones that are closer mainly. I went to Santa Ana. I went to Hot Springs, the Hot Springs Horror Film Festival. I went to Arizona, where we won Best Documentary too, the Tucson Terror Fest. And I would take Gary Kent along with me.
Oh, nice.
Gary Kent, who's 88 now. Gary Kent is the inspiration for the Brad Pitt stuntman character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he's 88. If he would agree to it, I'd just take him, just because he needs to go do stuff.
Yeah. Very, very cool guy. Had him on the show. Friends with him on Facebook. He seems like a very active guy. He's always posting. And
yeah, he's got challenges. I mean, he beat himself up pretty bad as a stuntman, but he's still going strong. So
what was that experience like watching the movie? I assume you worked on for years, because a lot of the footage is over many years. To get it to watch it with an audience. It's great, but it also is that thing that kind of like actors say, is that I see every little thing, every little tick that other people might not see. I found lately that we played it in Seguin, Texas, where Bob Burns lived, and it was always a plan. When we started the project, we went there, and they said, "Hey, you need to come back to town," and so we did. And I found myself just sitting back and enjoying it. So it's cool, and it's great to get an audience reaction. Yeah, for an independent film like this, film festivals are the theatrical release. We have the weird thing, and I'm freaking out about it. I'm in Austin, Texas, and we are screening for a week starting on Friday. Oh, nice. The Galaxy Theater in Austin. And, it's 14 screenings total. So it's about the same as all of the film festival screenings, Yeah. It's close to the same number. Yeah, that's great. So I said it. The footage is over an extended period of time. So when did you start, creating this? We started in 2017. It didn't take that long. I mean, there's footage that we had that my editor had. Oh, okay. We started in 2017. We were really done right at the time COVID hit. Then, that kind of put everything to a stop. We had one screening in Florida in near Rondo Hatton's hometown of Tampa, where we won Best of Fest. But really, that was the only one, and I didn't go because of COVID, and I'm not sure how many people were actually in the audience. And then after a while, it started up, and for the last year, we've had a film festival tour. Yeah. So when were you aware of Rondo Hatton? I think probably a lot of younger people are aware of Rondo from the Rondo Awards. Yeah, really. I learned about him from Bob. I did not know about him. And then I realized, I looked back in my old film column, I had written about Bob going to Tampa to accept an award on behalf of Rondo, his induction into the High School Football Hall of Fame at Hillsborough High School in Tampa. So,
I just mainly knew about him first from that, and dug in, and I find him fascinating.
Yeah. Do you yourself learn a lot about Rondo Hatton? Doing your own documentary.
Sure, yeah, and I love the notion. It's that a guy says it in the movie that Bob Burns was a normal-looking guy who was extremely weird, in a good way, creative way, and Rondo was a weird-looking guy who was quite normal. He was an all-American kid, and he was from all I can tell, a great guy who was helpful to everybody, and gracious. He didn't have any Hollywood attitude. Was
that kind of your connection? Obviously, Bob, you said was obsessed with Rondo, but that's also the connection of the movie. Is one guy's outwardly, people might though, this guy's weird, but inside he isn't, and then the reverse with Bob.
Yeah, and also the notion that Bob was looking for love, and he never really found it, and Rondo did. And I was interested in the love story of. That's what I tell people. I've had this deal where I go to these screenings, like Texas Frightmare. At Texas Frightmare, a woman came out to me and said, "My significant other drugged me here, and I didn't expect to like it, but I really did."
Oh, that's cool.
So I think there's a different audience for it as well beyond horror.
It's interesting because you said about the horror festivals, and maybe horror people want to see horror movies, but you also want to see a documentary. But I do think it's something like when you're about the people themselves, just the fact that they were in horror movies, it doesn't really matter. If you would just want to find out a story about someone, it's in the documentary.
Yeah, and Bob did so much. I think he really did create the look of horror with Chainsaw.
Oh, definitely. Do you think that's before the internet? Do you think the art direction is kind of an overlooked thing?
I think maybe so, but not by filmmakers. That was right. The deal. Bob did Chainsaw, and they had that horrible financial experience. The mob was involved and all that kind of stuff. And Bob did not want to do it again. And they came calling for him. People found out. So the Peter Locke, the producer of The Hills Have Eyes, came looking for Bob because he liked the look of Chainsaw. And the same thing happened with Stuart Gordon. The word got around about him. So he didn't really, he was not a horror fan at all. But word got around that he could do this stuff and make it look really incredible.
Yeah.
His belief was
not a horror fan. Yeah.
Yeah. His belief was that the art director should be invisible. The art direction should be invisible. You shouldn't be saying, "Oh, that's cool looking."
Right.
You should be feeling it. You should be feeling the creepiness of it all.
Yeah. Something like you said, the director would pick up on that because they're making the movie. And then more hardcore fans, after they've seen the movie many times, start to, would actually pay attention to it. Yeah. Something like you said, you're invisible. Your eye notices, your brain notices, but you might not pick up on it.
Which is the whole deal with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
It's a movie that's not bloody, really. It's all about the hint of everything. And I think it all comes down to Tobe Hooper, Bob Burns, and Wayne Bell, who did the music sound for it.
Even just the opening of the movie, the weird noise, everything about it's just it has a feeling like you shouldn't be watching this movie.
Right, exactly, and that's what you want.
Mm-hmm. And that's a movie I bring up because I saw a bad print 35 millimeter at a theater near me, and that adds to it. And then I saw at the same theater the restored one, and it wasn't nearly as effective because they brightened it up too much and it looked too clean.
Yeah. Maybe it's always meant to be dirty.
Yeah, it has a dirty feel to it. I mean that in a positive way for the movie.
Oh yeah.
The I forget the guy's name, but he's the guy who owns the museum, and he owns the mom, the grandma. I had dinner with him actually at Texas Frightmare because a friend of mine he came there for the dark arts. It was Ed Neal and his girlfriend, his wife, I'm not sure who she is, put that on, and he was there. And so I really love Texas Frightmare in general, but that guy owns some wild stuff.
Yeah. That's that's a family that the guy who originally owned it got it from Ed Neal, and he died. And so his brothers take care of that stuff at an undisclosed location.
Okay. Yeah.
It's full of everything. He said, "Yeah, don't tell anybody where we are."
Right. Yeah. One of my best memories of doing the show, I had dinner with him, Ed Neal, his girlfriend, his wife, his significant other, and Sid Haig and some other people. And it was a very, very cool time.
Very cool. Yeah.
And he's quite a character himself, the guy who owns all that stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I love the Halloween costumes that Bob Burns made.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I've seen imitations of them around. They'll come up. I saw something. I don't want to mention politics particularly, but it was like a Trump thing,
right?
That was a person being carried. Bob had this one costume, and he would redo it all the time. He and I and Gary Kent and another guy tried to put on a film festival at one point years ago, and he made a costume of a film director being carried by a nurse, and the nurse's legs are his legs, and the film director has little dangly legs, and it's just incredible. And when he died, and this is something I should have put in the film, maybe I didn't hear it till after, but somebody went into one of the closets and they saw that costume in whatever state it was in at that point, and they were kind of thinking, "Oh, this is some weird stuff going on here, weird sexual thing going, sex toys." These guys, no, it's a costume, But Stuart Gordon, the director of Reanimator, no longer with us. He talked about going to visit Bob and going to thrift stores with him, and he just said it was the most incredible fun thing, because Bob could go in there and come away with things to create something.
Yeah.
He was the master of it. I wish he'd stuck around. He would have done some more incredible stuff.
Yeah, definitely. What was because you say he was a horror movie fan. So what was his background before Texas Chainsaw? Like, how did he even get into art direction?
He went to Austin High School, where he was a drama student, and went to the University of Texas and got a degree in theater. And he was doing graphic design. He did early posters for Stevie Ray Vaughan's band Blackbird.
That's in the documentary too. Yeah.
Yeah. And he knew Tobe Hooper just from that small community of creative people at the University of Texas. He did marketing material for Tobe Hooper's first film, Eggshells. And then when time came to do Chainsaw, Tobe Hooper knew that Bob Burns was the guy to go to. And plus, Bob's girlfriend, who was the stunt woman, Mary Church, who was the stunt woman in Chainsaw. Her family had a big ranch up near Dallas. And basically, when the cattle died, their bodies just decomposed out there in the fields. And so he knew to go up there and look for all those bones. So maybe he told this to Tobe Hooper, I don't know. That Tobe Hooper saw in Bob that creative energy. When he was in high school, he was creating sets. So it was not, for plays. So it was not new to it.
Yeah.
But Chainsaw really caused the whole thing, and it's amazing, like the Leatherface mask. He just found the right formula to create these things. And there are so many fans, and they contact me because they hear about the documentary. There are so many fans who are trying to duplicate his exact formula, to make them.
Mm-hmm.
And they never seem to get quite there, but they're very close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you yourself a horror movie fan?
I am. I grew up. I grew up in Austin, and cable television when I was a kid meant you got San Antonio channels. And in San Antonio, they had a thing on Friday nights. When I was a little kid, I'd go stay at my dad's house because he had cable. They had a thing called Project Terror, where the scientific and the terrifying merge. And I would watch all of the old, horror films, schlocky stuff. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Day the Earth Stood Still, I Was a Teenage Werewolf, just all that kind of, They played everything. And I just ate that stuff up. So yeah, it's something that attracts me. I don't know what the attraction is, but other than just scaring ourselves,
All right.
you know.
So, how about documentaries? What made you want to pursue, being a documentary filmmaker?
It just kind of happened. I've had this mix of fiction and nonfiction. I worked as a newspaper reporter and editor, and then I went to graduate school to get a degree in creative writing, a master's degree in creative writing, MFA. And so something happened where I do things that are between the fact and the fiction. And I knew Gary Kent. I'd interviewed him for my column and written about him in a couple of different places. And I kept saying to Gary, somebody needs to do a film about you. And then he was going to release his memoir. And I realized, oh, that person's me. And so I had to figure out how to do that. I overdid it. I had 2 camera crews when his book was released. I overdid it and didn't really know what I was trying to accomplish. So for that film, the second half of the film is really more me. And you can see more relation to Rondo and Bob in the second half of Danger God. Mm-hmm. But I know that I'm interested from the fiction side in telling human stories. And I'm interested in the nonfiction side to document this world,
I'm glad you said nonfiction and fiction, because I do think sometimes people think of the documentaries not necessarily like telling a story like a traditional movie, but do you agree that they're still the same thing? You're telling a story.
Yeah, and if they're not, then they're boring.
Exactly.
I don't want to name the name, but I saw a documentary that's making the rounds, and it's all a catalog of stuff. And it just didn't work for me because it was mainly just a catalog of stuff. Here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one. But, what's your point, I guess.
I actually think I know what you might be talking about, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to say, because I don't.
Yeah.
People work forever on stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
I did work forever on this, and it's like, it's your baby. You don't want people to badmouth it.
Yeah. Because I like documentaries myself, and I always think it's kind of, people will say the documentary is not supposed to tell you exactly what to think. And I guess, like any movie is not necessarily to tell you what to think, but any documentary is going to have, kind of forming, where things are going. So it's still entertainment.
Have you seen American Movie? Mark?
Oh yeah. Yeah. One of my first guests on the show actually is Mark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was at South by Southwest one year, wandering around the convention hall, and there's Mark Borchardt with a beer in his hand. And I went over and said, Mark, how you doing? And I'm Joe. And he said, Joe, man, I'm having fun, man. He was just straight out of the movie.
Yeah.
But that's an example. That movie is successful because of him.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you're telling that guy he's the hero of the story, he's the underdog, and you want to see him do well.
And it's all about that notion of trying to make it. Mm-hmm. That the American dream and trying to make it. Yeah. That's Bob's story in a lot of ways too.
Mm-hmm. It's even interesting. There's a part, it's kind of sad because Bob, he was working on a movie in the documentary, and in real life, it's in the documentary. And like he said, he had to leave it because he was living off peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It's people like especially horror fans. This is like arguably, the top of art directors. And he couldn't make a living, doing it. He had to go and he did doing dialect coaching.
Yeah. Well, part of that is because Bob was who he was, which was he wanted to do what he wanted to do.
Right.
And he didn't like Hollywood.
Yeah.
He wanted to come back to Texas and be able to do it in Texas. And it was more difficult because, the people weren't there to make the connections with. He continued to do a lot.
Yeah.
People should look him up on IMDb and see all the stuff that he worked on,
Before I forget, though, Mark Borchardt, it's one of the strangest interviews I ever did. Right before we did that one live, and I had prepared and stuff. Right before we went live, he's like, he told us he didn't want to talk about American Movie.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh, okay. And then he was at a house party and just started passing the phone around to random friends. It's a very bizarre interview, but it's probably very fun. At the time, I didn't know what to think about it, but looking back, is a very weird and fun experience.
Send me a link. I'd like to watch it.
Yeah, it's not video one. It's when we were still audio only, but
okay.
But it's the podcast is up. And I do recommend people do check out Danger God. I do like the Gary Kent documentary too.
Thank you.
So actually, so Rondo and Bob, that comes out June 7th. How is it going to be available? Is it is it streaming? Is there physical copies?
Yeah, streaming just now. That no physical copies yet. People clamor for them because horror people are the ones who actually are collectors.
Yeah.
So we'll have to do it at some point. I'd like to have a Blu-ray out. But they were just interested, the distributors, Electric Entertainment, and they're really good about penetrating the marketplace. So it'll be everywhere. It won't be yet at subscription places like Netflix or Shudder. I'm hoping for Shudder. I'd really like it to be on Shudder. I think it would work well. And it's not on the AVOD, the advertising base like Tubi. Mm-hmm. Those are all ahead like 3 months from now. But every place else, they should find it. People should find it.
Those are the two I do like, though, Shudder and Tubi. And from I hear from independent, filmmaker friends of mine, Tubi treats independent filmmakers well. And Shudder is such good content, and it's a wide variety of stuff. It's, you can watch some old classic stuff. You can watch a lot of international stuff you might not see before, some obscure stuff, and a lot of independent stuff. It's a good mix.
Yeah. It'll be first on, Amazon Prime, iTunes, the satellite and cable providers, on demand on those. It should be in tons of places. So,
in the documentary, it said that Bob's movie, Scream Test, was never released. How much of footage is there from that?
I get the whole movie on video.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I don't know if there's actual film of it. And a lot of the people who like to re-release stuff or discover things like that want the film so they can mess with it.
Oh, yeah. So they can
Yeah, but we've got the VHS. His producer friend, Ed Toutant, who has since died, his family really owns the rights to that movie because he was the sole financier of that film. Bob went to him often for money. He would sell him stuff. We have one of the first things we did in the movie, I think it's the first scene we actually shot, was when Bob Burns interviewed Gunnar Hansen to be Leatherface and Chainsaw. The reason we did that is because I went to Ed Toutant's house, and in what would probably be a laundry room in most houses sat the Deep Throat pinball machine that Bob Burns had created. Gunnar Hansen.
I was wondering about that, actually. I didn't know if that was some weird, but he created it. Okay.
He created it. Yeah, just using an actual pinball machine. He made this thing. And Gunnar Hansen talks about it in his memoir about going to see Bob. Bob was the first line of interview for him to be Leatherface, and talking about that pinball machine being there. And I saw it sitting there, and he said, yeah, Bob sold it to me. And I said, okay, we're going to shoot this scene right here because I don't want to move the pinball machine. And so we outfitted this as Bob Burns's office. His office was called the RH Factor, Rondo Hatton, because everything was about Rondo Hatton for him. So that was kind of cool,
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know how I got into that, but that story.
No, that was an interesting scene because at the time I wasn't sure when I started watching it, how much of the recreations, what were they based on and stuff, but I'm glad to get the backstory in there. And I actually was very curious about the pinball machine because a friend of mine collects old pinball, and I'm I have to ask him about this, if this is a real pinball machine or what's going on here.
Yeah. And Ed Toutant, the guy who owned it, he had a brain tumor. And he called me, and things were not looking good for him. And he said that he wanted to donate it to pay for the film. And so he did that. Proceeds going to paying for some of the film. It's with a collector now.
Yeah. Where can people follow the film and to see where it's going?
RondoandBob.com. And we've got a Facebook page too. Just go to Facebook and look up Rondo and Bob. And we're on Twitter. I think we got a Twitter page. I just have a page. You can look at joeoconnell.com.
All right.
And I'm on Instagram and that kind of stuff too.
And we're focused on Rondo and Bob, but do you have anything in the works?
During COVID time, I was in a writing program called the Book Project out of the Lighthouse Writers Workshop in Denver. And it's also film related. It's not horror. It's called The Contortionists. Everybody has seen this video, even if they don't realize it. Once they see it, I've already seen it. 3 girls from Texas, the Ross sisters, who were contortionists. They were in a 1940s movie called Broadway Rhythm, where they're dancing to a song called Solid Potato Salad. And they go into crazy contortions. The video, if you go look it up, Ross Sisters YouTube, keep watching because it will get more bizarre. And I wanted to find out what happened to them. And so I've spent longer than these 2 years, and I was already working on it before that, researching and writing a book. And I finished the first draft of it. I'm supposed to get notes from my mentor and start revising.
Oh, very cool.
They're fascinating. I mean, where life sent them. They were on Broadway. They were vaudeville, Broadway, Hollywood, and then they went to the London stage and met husbands. One girl's husband was a crazy American dancer, literally crazy, schizophrenic, who beat her all the time. Another one married a French ventriloquist, Robert Lamoureux, who had a duck named Doudoul. And he was all over American television back in the 50s, 60s. He was on the Ed Sullivan Show and things like that. And the third one married the Dick Van Dyke of England, a guy named Dickie Henderson, who had his own TV show, much like Dick Van Dyke. And that sister ended up committing suicide. So.
That's very interesting. I'm looking forward to that, when it eventually is out there.
That was too expensive to make as a movie.
Right.
I'd like to see somebody else make it.
Yeah.
But I realize there are a number of young female contortionists in the United States. They have big fan bases. There's one in Germany named Nina Burry. And there are some, there's like twins in the United States, little blonde young women who do it. And it's on all those, America's Got Talent type shows.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's an interesting world to discover and look into.
Yeah, I guess I like interesting worlds too.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, people should check out Rondo and Bob. And you said, if eventually do you have the Blu-ray, do you have a lot of footage that wasn't used in the documentary that, maybe you'd have for as extras?
Yes. We've got tons of extras to go on there. And we just had, it's so tough when you have to start doing the trimming process.
Yeah.
And I was told that I'm a bit of a completist. I'm giving you all sides of Bob Burns. There's more sides of him that I didn't even touch on.
Do you do your own editing?
I have an editor, but we work side by side. We rented an editing office for a year and sat there and did it. Got mad at each other occasionally.
I always assume that it would be hard to edit your own stuff that you filmed because you also have the memory of filming it. And then does that come into play? Like, I remember this and it means something to me, but does it actually benefit the story I'm telling?
Yeah, and then you have to slash. At some point, you slash that stuff out. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. And for us, because the story was about Rondo and about Bob, we had color-coded Post-it notes up on the wall, and I was rearranging them all the time because I wanted you never to reach that point where you said, "Yeah, plenty of Bob. Where's Rondo?"
Right.
And so it jumps back and forth a lot between those two stories. while we have a bit of a forward momentum of Bob searching for Rondo. So it's an interesting process, and it changes. And then we added stuff like the image you see behind me. We had access to a green screen, and we decided, we need to do some green screen with Rondo because he was a newspaper reporter. And so I bought some stock footage just of people running around a newsroom back in the 1940s, typing away and everything. And we put Rondo at some little typewriter. Just basically what you see.
Yeah. It made me, I'll be honest, I'm guilty. Like a lot of people, I probably know Rondo mostly from the Rondo Awards. It did make me want to research him more, because I don't know a lot about him besides the documentary.
Watch House of Horrors.
Okay.
And our posters are homages to posters for House of Horrors. Now we have two. We have the lightning bolt one, which is, I think, my favorite. We have a blue one, and both of those are takeoffs of House of Horrors posters.
Cool. Yeah, I love the poster art, by the way. The Rondo and Bob one with the lightning coming out of his eyes. It looks great.
Yeah, well, and there's one like that. I mean, and I had a painter do that. He's a great painter and tattoo artist that I know.
I love the hand painted posters because they do. They have that old school feel that that I like.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes they change them after the festivals. If you do put out the Blu-ray, they'll want maybe a more traditional one. But I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
All right. Well, this has been very cool to talk with you, and I'd like to do it again sometime.
All right, sounds good.